June watched the stars slide past the viewport of the diplomatic shuttle, a silent river of light against the endless black. He'd made this trip to the Galactic Council's ring station dozens of times, but the cold knot in his stomach told him this one was different. Beside him, Una was reviewing her notes, her fingers tracing lines of text on a datapad that illuminated her calm, focused expression. "They will cite the Kezer conflict again," she said without looking up, her voice steady. "They'll say our unpredictable territorialism mirrors the early Kezer, and that containment is the only logical path." "We are not the Kezer," June replied, his own voice tighter than he intended. "We did not glass 3 worlds over a mining dispute. Logic to them is about patterns, June, not morality." She finally looked at him. "Remember, we are here to present alternatives. The shared development proposal for the asteroid belts is fair. More than fair." The shuttle docked with a soft thud and a hiss of equalizing pressure. The corridor leading to the grand chamber was a marvel of alien architecture, soaring arches that seemed made of light and whispers, a display of power meant to awe newcomers. It had worked on June once. Now he saw it for what it was, a beautifully crafted cage. The grand chamber was a vast, circular space. Seats rose in tiers, occupied by representatives of the dozen species that made up the ruling Galactic Council. The air hummed with translated chatter, a bizarre symphony of clicks, whistles, and synthesized words. At the center of the chamber floor was the petitioner's platform, a stark circle of plain gray metal. A place for supplicants. June and Una took their place on the platform. The chamber fell silent. The presiding official was a Velinor, its species tall and slender, with skin the color of polished nickel and large, black eyes that held no warmth. It was named Kalen, though it rarely used personal designations. It was the voice of the council. "The petition of Earth, Sol System, is recognized," Kalen stated, its voice a smooth, androgynous tone emitted from a translator disc on its chest. "You may present your final appeal regarding Council Directive 77 Alpha, the Solar System, Resource Management and Human Containment Order." Una stepped forward, her posture perfect, her hands clasped lightly before her. "Esteemed Council, for 3 cycles we have submitted geological surveys, economic models, and historical precedents. Our claim to the resource-rich asteroid belts in our own home system is not an act of aggression. It is a necessity for our continued development. The shared development framework we propose offers a 40% share of all extracted materials to the Council, with full transparency. We ask not for special treatment, but for the right to thrive within the community of civilized worlds." A grell, a species that resembled a bipedal insect with iridescent wings, clicked its mandibles. "Thrive is a subjective term, Ambassador. Your species' growth rate is alarming. Unregulated access to such resources would lead to destabilization. The Kezer pattern is clear: rapid expansion followed by conflict." June fought to keep his breathing even. "With respect, Ambassador, correlation is not causation. Human history has its conflicts, but our last world scale, war was over a century before we developed FTL. The proposed framework includes Council oversight. We are offering you a stake in our success, not a threat." Kalen tilted its head. "Oversight is a reactive measure. The directive is preventative. The belts will be administered by a Council-appointed consortium. Earth may purchase resources at standard galactic rates. This is the logical solution. It ensures stability. It ensures our dependence," June said, the words escaping before he could soften them. "It condemns us to permanent second-class status. You are not preventing conflict. You are enforcing poverty." A murmur, not of sympathy but of disapproval, rippled through the chamber. Emotional reasoning. It was a mark against them. The debate, if it could be called that, continued for an hour. Yuna was brilliant, dismantling their economic arguments with precise data. June appealed to the few principles of sovereignty the Council claimed to uphold. But he could see it in the unblinking black eyes of the Valinor, in the folded limbs of the others. The decision was not being made here today. It had been made long ago, in backroom discussions where humanity had no seat. Finally, Kalen raised a slender hand. The chamber quieted. The Council has heard the petition. We shall now vote on the ratification of Directive 77 Alpha, unamended. There was no discussion. One by one, representatives activated their panels. Lights glowed red across the tiers. Red for affirmation. Red for the directive. June's heart sank with each one. The Grell voted red. The aquatic Vishans voted red. The mammoth Boran voted red. Not a single green light of dissent broke the crimson consensus. Kalen turned its impassive gaze back to them. Directive 77 Alpha is ratified. The resource belts of the Sol system are hereby placed under Galactic Council stewardship. All human vessels currently operating within them have 24 standard hours to depart. A permanent monitoring fleet will be deployed to enforce the blockade. Furthermore, to prevent future instability, Earth's defensive fleet is to be reduced to planetary guard levels within one standard cycle. Compliance will be verified. It was worse than they had feared. Not just theft, but disarmament. Yuna's composure finally cracked, a flicker of raw anger in her eyes. This is not justice. This is predation disguised as policy. It is logic, Ambassador, Kalen replied. A younger, volatile species with unlimited resources is a threat to the galactic peace. The quarantine of the Sol system is now total until compliance is verified. Any attempt to breach the blockade, any resistance to the disarmament, will be met with proportionate and overwhelming force. The Council's patience is at an end. Comply, or be erased. The final word hung in the air. Sterile and absolute. Erased, not conquered, not punished, erased, like a mistake corrected on a datapad. They were escorted from the chamber in silence, back to their shuttle. The journey back to the Earth vessel, waiting at the system's edge, was a blur of grim quiet. June stared at his hands, feeling the weight of failure. Yuna sat perfectly still, her mind clearly racing. They boarded their ship, the Daedalus, a sleek craft built for speed and diplomacy, not war. The captain, a grim-faced woman named Hannah, listened to their report, her expression hardening into something like stone. They've already started, she said, gesturing to a tactical screen. Council scout ships are shadowing us. The blockade is forming at the heliopause. June moved to the communications console. He opened a channel to Earth, to the United Earth Government headquarters in Seoul. He delivered the news, his voice hollow as he repeated Kellen's ultimatum. There was a long pause from the other end. Then a new voice came on, calm, deep, and heavy with resolve. It was the President. Understood, Ambassador. Return home. Do not engage. Tell them. Tell the Council we have received their terms. And give them our answer. June looked at Yuna, who gave a single, sharp nod. He opened a broad channel frequency, one that would be heard by every ship in the vicinity, and relayed across the galactic network. He took a slow breath, thinking of Earth, of its blue skies and crowded cities, of its messy, beautiful, stubborn people. To the Galactic Council, he began, his voice no longer that of a supplicant, but something colder, firmer. You have delivered your judgment. You have chosen theft and threat over fairness and partnership. He paused, letting the silence stretch for a critical second. You have made this choice. He could almost feel the listening attention of the Valinor. The Grell, all of them. Now, June said, the words falling like stones. Pay the price. He closed the channel. On the tactical screen, the alien scout ships seemed to hesitate. as if uncertain how to process a threat from a species that was supposed to surrender. Hannah, at the helm, allowed herself a thin, hard smile. "Punch it," she said to her pilot. The Daedalus's engines flared, and the ship turned, not in a slow, diplomatic retreat, but in a sharp, defiant burn, heading for home. Behind them, the silent, glittering ring station of the Galactic Council receded into the starfield, its inhabitants unaware that the final warning had just been issued, and that the clock had started ticking. The silence on Earth was not the quiet of defeat. It was the focused, breath-held stillness of a predator waiting to strike. In the public channels, there was only a subdued, grim acceptance of the Galactic Council's terms. News programs showed the slow, obedient recall of Earth's few deep space mining vessels from the asteroid belts. The narrative for the aliens, listening in, was one of a broken spirit, underground, deep beneath the scarred surface of the moon, in a base known as Site Selene. A different truth hummed with energy. Myra's fingers flew across a holographic interface, equations and force diagrams swirling around her like a galaxy of blue light. Her eyes were shadowed from lack of sleep, but they burned with intensity. The resonance frequency is still fluctuating by 0.003%, she said, her voice echoing in the cavernous control room. It's not stable enough. If it drifts during activation, it could vaporize this base and half the lunar surface instead of generating a clean field. See Oak? Her co-lead leaned over a physical console nearby, his hands adjusting tangible dials with the engineer's preference for the tactile. The problem is the quantum dampeners. They're reacting to the background gravity of Jupiter. It's a tiny pull, but over this scale. He trailed off, shaking his head. Then we compensate, a new voice said. It was calm, older. Director Park, the head of Final Measure, stood at the entrance. He walked slowly into the room, his gaze fixed on the central reactor core, a massive, dormant ring of polished metal that dominated the chamber. We knew the tests on Mars were too controlled. Real space is messy. That's why we built it here, in the messy part. This isn't a lab experiment anymore. It never was, Myra muttered, but she knew he was right. Final Measure was the project deemed too dangerous to exist. Developed from a century-old theoretical paper on quantum vacuum manipulation, it didn't create explosions. It created a temporary, localized calm in the fabric of spacetime itself, neutralizing the subtle energies that made faster-than-light travel possible. It was not a weapon. It was a cage. We have 72 hours before their enforcement fleet arrives in earnest, Director Park said. The President has authorized the sequence. But the field must be perfect. A partial field, a flickering one, will tell them exactly what we have and give them a chance to adapt. Our only advantage is that they think we have nothing. Back on Earth, in a bunker beneath the mountains of Korea, the military side of the silence was being managed by people like Tae. He stood on the bridge of the EDS Guardian, the flagship of what the Council had dismissively called Earth's planetary guard. His ship and the 9 others in his squadron were small, fast, and armed with little more than point defense lasers and kinetic missiles toys against the shields of a Velinor cruiser. His orders were simple. Be a distraction. All ships. This is Guardian Actual, Tae said, his voice tight over the fleet come. We are the lure. Our job is to look desperate, look stupid, and lead them on a chase through the outer belt. We do not engage unless fired upon. We run. We dodge. We make them waste time in energy chasing gnats. Understood? A chorus of affirmatives echoed back. They were all volunteers. They all knew their ships were sacrificial pawns. On the Daedalus, now docked at a high-orbit station, June and Yuna were not resting. They were being briefed into Final Measure. They sat in a stark room with Director Park's image on a screen. "You delivered the warning," Director Park said. "Now you need to understand the tool. The resonance field will strand their entire armada, but it will also strand any of our people out there. It will cut off all communications except for line-of-sight laser pulses. For a period of time, we will be as trapped as they are." "How long?" Yuna asked. "The generator can sustain the field for a maximum of 6 Earth days before the lunar core begins to overheat. We will need to pulse-drop it for brief, planned windows to vent heat. Those windows will be vulnerabilities." June absorbed this. "So we don't win a war. We create a stalemate. We create a bargaining table," Director Park corrected. "One where they are sitting across from us, not looming over us from orbit. But to get them to that table, the trap must be sprung perfectly. The Council must believe, right up until the moment their drives fail, that they are walking into a surrender." The following hours were a global ballet of deception. Civilian traffic around Earth increased, showing false panic. Defensive satellites were powered down in a show of compliance. On the dark side of the moon, Mira and Siok finally found their solution. "It's not a flaw, it's a feature," Siok exclaimed, staring at a new dataset. "The Jupiter fluctuation is periodic, predictable. We can program the field generator to pulse in sync with it. The damping waves will actually reinforce the field stability at the edges." Mira ran the simulation. The holographic sphere, representing the resonance field, snapped into a perfect, steady globe, extending out past the orbit of Mars. The red warning indicators vanished. "He's right," she breathed, a smile touching her lips for the first time in days. "We can do this." Tay's squadron, the Gnats, launched on schedule. They shot out toward the asteroid belt, their signatures bright and obvious on any scanner. As predicted, a wing of 3 sleek Valinar interceptors broke from the forming blockade and pursued. The chase was a deadly dance. Tay pushed his ship to its limits, weaving through asteroid fields, using the rubble as cover. A near miss from a plasma bolt shook the Guardian. "Just a little closer," Tay whispered to his ship, leading them deeper into the trap zone. On Earth, the world held its breath. In Site Selene, Mira stood before the master control. Director Park's authorization code glowed on her screen. Siok gave her a thumbs up from his station, his face pale but determined. "Final measure," Mira said aloud, her voice clear in the silent room. Activation sequence initiated. Field generation in 10, 9. She counted down, her heart hammering against her ribs. On her screen, she could see the tactical feed. The Valinar fleet, confident and vast, was moving into the inner solar system. Tay's squadron was racing ahead of them, leading them right into the heart of where the field would form. 2, 1, engage. She pressed the final key. There was no sound. No violent tremor. Deep within the lunar core, a massive ring began to spin, then glow with a light that was not quite light. A vibration, felt not in the air but in the bones, thrummed through the base dot in space. Nothing visible changed. The stars did not twinkle. The sun did not dim. But aboard the lead Valinar command ship, a dozen alarms shrieked at once. The chief engineer, a being of cool logic, stared at its panels in disbelief. The quantum manifold was collapsing. The FTL core was going cold. Not failing, simply becoming inert, as if the laws that allowed it to function had been turned off. Frantic status reports flooded in from every ship in the Armada. The same story. Every faster-than-light drive, every hypercom node was dead. They were suddenly, utterly stranded. On the bridge of the Guardian, Tay saw his pursuers suddenly slow, their weapons' fire ceasing. A broad-spectrum comm channel crackled open, filled with alien consternation. He allowed himself a fierce grin. The gnats had led the lion into the pit. Back in Selene, Mira watched the field stability indicators hold steady in the green. Seok let out a whoop of relief. Director Park simply nodded. From Earth, a second transmission, tight beam to the Valinar command ship, was sent. It contained no grand speech, just 5 words, repeating on a loop. You are not alone now. The silence that followed was no longer Earth's. It belonged to the galaxy. And for the first time, it was filled with fear. The Valinar command ship, the Sovereign Will, floated in the sudden and absolute quiet. On its bridge, the soft hum of systems was the only sound. The star field on the main viewer was static, no longer the streaked blur of FTL travel. Admiral Kalen, the same being who had delivered the ultimatum in the Grand Chamber, stood perfectly still. Its large black eyes reflected the frantic data scrolling on a dozen screens. Report. Kalen's voice was flat, the translator disk failing to mask a thin layer of static. All FTL systems are non-responsive, the engineering officer clicked, its insectoid grell hands trembling over its console. The cores are intact. They show full power. But the quantum vacuum state around the ship, it is inert. It will not resonate. It is like trying to sail a ship on stone. Subspace communications? Gone. Local radio and laser comms only. We are isolated to this star system. Kalen turned its head slowly, taking in the tactical display. The entire Valinar armada, over 300 ships of war, was scattered across the inner solar system like discarded toys. Their formation, once a perfect spearhead aimed at Earth, was now a confused swarm. The human decoy ships, the gnats, had stopped running. They now held position, small and defiant, just outside weapon range. Scan for energy weapons, for mass drivers, for any signature of an attack, Kalen ordered. Scanning. Nothing, Admiral. No directed energy. No kinetic projectiles. No particle beam residue. Space-time is calm. Abnormally calm. That was the most unnerving part. There had been no flashy explosion, no violent tear in reality. One moment they were the masters of the galaxy, en route to accept a surrender. The next they were adrift, cut off from everything they knew. The silence from Earth was now a palpable force. On the moon, Myra monitored the field. The core temperature was rising, but within predicted parameters. The field is holding at 99.98% stability, she reported. The alien fleet is completely contained. Their short-range systems are still online. Life support, basic thrusters, weapons. They still have teeth, Seok noted from his station. They can still fight within the bubble, but they can't call for help. Director Park's voice came over the come from Earth. And they can't leave. That changes the psychology of a predator. Now they are simply hungry. On Earth, the order was given. A single small diplomatic shuttle, unarmed and marked with bright neutral colors, launched from a station in high orbit. Inside were June and Yuna. Hana was their pilot. Their mission was simple: make first contact with the caged predator. Remember, Yuna said, checking the translation software one last time. We are not here to gloat. We are here to state facts. They need to understand their situation is not an accident. It is a consequence. June nodded, watching the Sovereign Will grow larger in the viewport. It was a beautiful, terrible ship, shaped like a silver dagger. They will be furious. They may try to destroy us the moment we are in range. That is a risk, Hannah said from the cockpit, her hands steady on the controls. But Director Park believes their logic will override their anger. They are stranded. Destroying the only people who can explain what happened would be illogical. The shuttle was hailed when it entered close proximity. The Valinar Comes officer's voice was strained. Human vessel, halt your approach. Identify your intent. This is Ambassador Yuna and Ambassador June of Earth. We request permission to dock with the sovereign will for parley. We are unarmed. We carry an explanation. There was a long pause. June imagined the debate on the alien bridge. Finally, the response came. Permission granted. A single airlock. Any deviation will be met with immediate destruction. The docking procedure was smooth. The airlock of the Velinar ship was cold. The gravity slightly lighter than Earth's. As the inner door hissed open, they were met by a squad of armored Velinar guards. Their sleek rifles pointed at the floor, but ready. Admiral Kalen stood behind them, its expression unreadable. You have disabled our fleet, Kalen stated, dispensing with any greeting. We have applied a resonance field, Yuna corrected gently. It temporarily negates the conditions necessary for FTL travel and subspace communication within a defined radius of the sun. Why? To die alongside us? Your planet is still within range of our conventional weapons. We can reduce your cities to glass from this distance, even without FTL. June took a step forward, ignoring the subtle shift in the guard's stance. You could, but then you would be truly alone, in the dark, with no way home, and no way to ever understand what we did to you. Your people would never know your fate. You would float here, the last of your crew, until your power failed. Is that a logical end for the flagship of the Galactic Council's enforcement arm? Kalen was silent for a long moment. Explain your terms. Our terms are simple, Yuna said. A ceasefire. Your fleet powers down its primary weapons and moves to a holding orbit we will designate. In return, we will provide a schedule. A schedule of windows when the field will be temporarily lowered, allowing for limited, supervised communication with your council. You wish to negotiate from a position of blackmail. We wish to negotiate from a position of equality, June said, his voice firm. You came here to force us into a cage. We have simply shown you that the cage now holds us both. You can share it in silence, or we can discuss how to open the door. But the key is ours. Back on the Guardian, Tay watched the tactical feed. The human shuttle was docked with a massive alien flagship, a tiny gnat on the hide of a beast. All around, the rest of the Velinar fleet drifted, their weapon ports still ominously open, but no longer actively targeting. The confusion was turning into a desperate kind of order. They were starting to realize this wasn't a battle. It was a siege where both sides were inside the walls. On the sovereign will, Kalen finally gestured. The guards lowered their rifles. We will listen to your schedule. But understand, human, this is a delay, not a defeat. The Galactic Council does not bow to threats. Yuna allowed herself a small, polite smile. It was the one she used in the Grand Chamber when an opponent had just revealed a critical weakness. Admiral, she said, this is not a threat. It is a lesson. And the first lesson is this. You are not here because we are strong. You are here because you were arrogant. Now, shall we discuss the timetable? Your life support, after all, is not infinite. In the silent void, the message from Earth continued to ping against the hulls of the alien ships. A simple rhythmic pulse in basic galactic code. You are not alone now. For the first time in their long conquering history, the Velinar and their allies understood what it meant to be afraid of the dark. The trap was not one of steel and fire, but of simple, immutable physics. And they were well and truly caught. The silence within the resonance field was heavy, filled with the slow, grinding realization of the stranded armada. On the bridge of the sovereign will, Admiral Kalen stared at the data on its screen, the schedule provided by the humans. It was a brutal piece of logic. In 6 hours, the field would drop for exactly 9 minutes and 17 seconds. That was the first window. Long enough to send a compressed data burst to the Galactic Council, but not long enough for any ship to spool up its FTL drive and escape. A leash, carefully measured. They are treating us like malfunctioning machinery, the Grell engineering officer hissed. To be reset on their timer. They are treating us as we treated them, Kalen replied, its voice hollow. As a problem to be managed. The truth was a cold weight in its gut. Their weapons were still powerful, their hulls still strong. But they were adrift in a way no spacefaring species ever imagined. The fear of never returning home, of becoming a forgotten ghost fleet, was a psychological weapon the Council had never needed to invent. On Earth, the mood was one of grim vigilance, not celebration. In the command bunker, Director Park watched feeds from the moon and from Tay's squadron, which now patrolled just outside the alien fleet's weapon range. The aliens were compliant for now, moving their ships to the designated holding orbit near Mars, but everyone knew it was a fragile piece. We need to understand why, Park said to a team of analysts. This wasn't just about resources. Their reaction was too extreme. Dig into every intercepted communication, every database fragment we've ever gathered from trade missions. There is a missing piece. The task fell to Min, a tactical analyst whose skill was seeing patterns in chaos. While others focused on fleet movements and field stability, he sifted through centuries of dull trade agreements, cultural exchange logs, and declassified council bulletins. He looked for the shadow behind the official words. Meanwhile, the first communication window arrived. In Site Selene, Myra and Siok initiated the controlled pulse. The massive generator cycled down, its deep hum fading. For 9 minutes and 17 seconds, the strange calm over the solar system lifted dot on the sovereign will. Every alarm blared as systems came back online. The FL core sang with potential energy. Subspace channels screamed to life, filled with a backlog of frantic queries from the Council. Kalen moved with swift efficiency. It sent the pre-prepared data burst, their situation, the nature of the human field, a request for instructions. It was a sterile, factual report. But in the final second of the window, as the field began to reactivate and the stars on the view screen once again froze, a second, smaller burst arrived from the Council. It was marked for Kellen's eyes only. The field resealed, plunging them back into silence. Kalen opened the private message. It was from a high-level Velanor political overseer. The message was brief. Maintain position. Do not reveal Project Aegis. The humans must not learn the true purpose of the asteroid belts. Kalen deleted the message, a sense of profound disillusionment settling over it. The Council's priority was not the fleet's survival, but the secrecy of a project. Back on Earth, Min found it. It was buried in a financial ledger from a decade ago, a record of a geological survey conducted by a boron mining guild in the very asteroid belt Earth claimed. The survey was unusually detailed and classified at a level far beyond simple mineralogy. Cross-referencing it with energy signatures from old human deep space telescopes, he saw a discrepancy. The boron weren't just looking for metals. They were mapping gravitational anomalies, specific pockets of space-time dot. He brought his findings to June and Yuna, who had returned from their tense meeting on the alien flagship. They weren't just taking our resources, Min explained, his eyes bright with the thrill of the discovery. They were preparing the site. The composition of those asteroids, the specific quantum signature of that region. It's perfect for anchoring a massive, stable wormhole. A permanent gateway. The Council wasn't just managing us. They were planning to install a galactic highway exit ramp in our backyard. Our system would become a transit hub, controlled entirely by them. We wouldn't be a second-class species. We'd be a displaced one. A nuisance cleared from a construction site. The revelation spread through Earth's leadership like an electric shock. The directive wasn't greed. It was real estate theft on a cosmic scale. The promised purchase at standard rates was a lie. There would be no purchase. There would be relocation or eradication. Yuna's usual calm hardened into something icy. We need to make them admit it, publicly, to their own people and to any other species listening. The next communication window was in 12 hours. The human strategy shifted. They would not just offer a bargain. They would put the council on trial. When the field dropped again, it was Earth that sent the first burst, not to the council, but on every public galactic channel they could access. It contained Min's evidence, the financial records, the geological data, the energy signatures. It laid out Project Aegis in clear, damning detail. The message ended with a simple question. Is this your logic? Is this your peace? Chaos erupted in the wider galaxy. Species on the council, who were junior partners, who had been told the human issue was one of security, began demanding answers. The Vilnor narrative of a rogue planet began to crumble. The private channel to the sovereign will buzzed. It was Kalen. Its image looked strained. You have uncovered the truth. You knew, June stated, not asking. I knew the directive's ultimate goal was installation of a council transit nexus. I did not know the planned method for human relocation. I believed your species would be integrated as a client race. Kalen paused, its pride visibly warring with a new, uncomfortable reality. The message from my overseer confirms your conclusion. The fleet is expendable. The project is not. Yuna leaned into the pickup. Then your logic has a flaw, Admiral. You are protecting leaders who see you as a tool to be discarded. We see you as a being stuck in a cage of its own making. Help us dismantle the cage. What do you propose? During the next window, June said, you will not just receive orders. You will send a new message. A testimony from you to the full council. You will confirm our evidence. You will state that the human response, while severe, was provoked by a genocidal deceit. Kalen was silent for a long moment. To do so was treason. But the idea of dying in the dark, to protect the lies of politicians who had abandoned it, that was illogical. The field will drop in 6 hours, Kalen said finally. You will have your testimony. The connection ended. On Earth, Director Park allowed himself a small breath. They had turned a piece on the board. The price the galaxy was paying was no longer just a stranded fleet. It was the unraveling of their moral authority. And it was a price being demanded not just by humanity, but by one of their own. The choice the Council had made was now echoing back to them, louder and more damning with every passing silent hour. The final communication window arrived. The air in the bunker on Earth was charged with a static tension. This was not just about sending a signal. It was about launching a new reality into the galaxy. On the moon, Myra monitored the core temperature as she initiated the power-down sequence. The deep, bone-thrumming vibration of the resonance field faded, leaving an eerie normalcy in its wake. Field is down, she reported, her voice clear in the sudden quiet of Selene control. Window is open. You have 9 minutes and 17 seconds. In Seoul, the signing chamber was not a grand hall of alien architecture. It was a human place, all clean lines, polished wood, and glass overlooking the revitalized Han River. Sunlight streamed in. June and Yuna stood at a simple podium. Before them was a physical document, a gesture of permanence in a digital age. The terms were displayed on screens for the galaxy to see. Across the chamber, holographic projectors flickered to life. One by one, the figures of the Galactic Council's primary species appeared, the Velnir. The Grell, the Veshans, the Boran. Their images were faint, strained by the tight bandwidth of the short window, but their presence was undeniable. They were no longer looming from a raised dais. They were eye level. Admiral Kellen's testimony, sent in the previous window, had done its work. The galactic media was in an uproar. The secrecy of Project Aegis, the planned displacement of a sentient species, the cynical sacrifice of their own fleet, it had shattered the Council's claim of benevolent logic. Public pressure from 100 junior species, and even factions within the major ones, had forced this meeting. They came to the table not as masters, but as damaged politicians seeking a way out. The lead negotiator was a new Velinor, a political envoy named Vale. Its tone was stripped of the old coldness, replaced by a weary formality. The Galactic Council acknowledges the irregularities in the administration of Directive 77 Alpha. We are prepared to discuss its dissolution and the restoration of Earth's sovereign claims to its solar resources. Una did not smile. That is the starting point, Envoy Vale, not the conclusion. She gestured to the document. The terms are these. 1. The unconditional and permanent revocation of Directive 77 Alpha. 2. The formal recognition of Earth as a sovereign governing member of the Galactic Council, with a permanent seat and full voting rights. 3. The dismantling of the Council's unilateral enforcement arm, in its replacement with a multi-species peacekeeping force, to which Earth will contribute. 4. A full public audit of all Council territorial projects over the last century, to be overseen by a committee including human historians. The list went on. It was not a petition. It was a blueprint for a new galactic order. The holograms of the alien delegates flickered with what could only be interpreted as shock and agitation. This is unprecedented. The Grell representative clicked. You demand to rewrite the foundational treaties. June leaned forward. No, you broke the foundational treaties when you plotted to erase us. We are not rewriting them. We are writing the First Amendment, the one that says never again. The choice is simple. Sign, and the resonance field will be permanently deactivated. Your fleet will go home. Refuse, and the field remains. We will share this silence until your ships are scrap and your authority is dust. There was a frantic, silent conference among the flickering holograms. They were out of time, out of options, and out of moral ground. The clock on the wall, synchronized with the lunar generator, ticked down the final minutes of the window. Envoy Vale looked not at its peers, but directly at the image of Admiral Kalen, who had been granted a witness link from the bridge of the sovereign will. Kalen gave a single slow nod. It was the nod of a soldier who had seen the cost of the old way. The Galactic Council, Vale said, each word seeming to paint it, accepts the terms of the Treaty of Soul. One by one, the holographic delegates provided their digital signatures. Aborin used a thumbprint of light. Aveshan used a unique frequency hum. When the last was given, Una picked up a pen. She and June signed the physical document with a simple, human stroke of ink. The treaty is ratified, June said. In Selene control, Mira received the coded signal. She placed her hand over the master control. Disengaging final measure. Full deactivation sequence initiated. She pressed the button. This time, the process was not silent. A deep, grateful sigh seemed to emanate from the lunar rock as the giant ring powered down for the last time, its light dying to a dull glow. The cage was open. On the tactical screens across Earth's command centers, the change was immediate. The strange, flat stillness vanished from the sensors. Subspace channels erupted into a cacophony of normal galactic traffic, and the stars on the view screen of every ship in the solar system began to move again. Their slow drift, a comforting promise of a universe reopened. The Velinar fleet, its weapons powered down, slowly began to turn. Using only their sublight drives, they moved away from Mars, forming a ragged line out toward the heliopause, toward home. The sovereign will was the last to go. Before it left, a final tight beam message arrived for June and Una. It was from Kalen. You taught a lesson we did not know we needed to learn. The price was high. We will not forget it. On the balcony outside the signing chamber, Una watched the first hints of twilight color the sky over Seoul. The city lights began to sparkle below. June joined her, handing her a cup of tea. It's done, he said. No, Una replied, taking the warm cup. It's just begun. We have a seat at a table that tried to break us. Now we have to learn how to use it. We have to make sure the price they paid today was worth it. He followed her gaze upward, where the first pinpricks of stars were becoming visible in the darkening blue. They were no longer points of light belonging to distant, hostile masters. They were destinations, possibilities, and a reminder. The galaxy had made a choice based on arrogance and fear. Earth had made them pay for it not with blood and fire, but with a simple, profound demonstration of consequence. The warning had been delivered. The balance of power had shifted on an axis of resolved will. As the stars spun overhead in their ancient patterns, they now told a new story, one where humanity, having been pushed to the brink, did not fall, but instead, quietly and firmly, changed the rules forever.